Hello! I have some news on the Stop Killing Games campaign. Arguably our biggest news so far. Actually, I have two items, so I'll just jump right in. The UFC-Que Choisir, a major consumer advocacy group in France, is suing Ubisoft over removing the crew from customers. This is a big deal. I'll go over why, but let's look at what they have to say. Now, the version I'm reading is translated from French, so it's possible the wording here may not be 100% accurate, but it's good enough for the broad strokes. The UFC is suing Ubisoft in the Créteil Judicial Court following the shutdown of the servers for the crew. This unilateral decision rendered the game completely unusable, depriving consumers of any access to a game they had purchased without having ever been informed of any expiration date. I like how they're putting expiration date in quotes because games are code. If the storage medium is good, they can last forever. Hey, here's a book. When do the words in the book expire? Similar concept. Now, of course, the platform the code runs on can change, but that's not the game maker's fault. And I know a few out there are saying, I don't understand. Games can also depend on code not on the customer's system, or sometimes even the publishers. Yes, and doing that with no end-of-life plan is exactly why Ubisoft is getting into trouble. Let's continue. Supported by the Stop Killing Games movement, the association intends to obtain a crucial court ruling on the following question. Does the purchase of a video game in physical or digital format allow players to claim at a minimum a right of use totally independent of the sole will and authorization of the publisher? For the UFC-Que Choisir, the answer is obviously yes, which is why, through this action, it is demanding the removal of certain unfair terms from Ubisoft's contractual conditions and the cessation of commercial practices that it considers misleading to the detriment of consumers. UFC-Que Choisir believes that by abruptly depriving players of all access to the crew, Ubisoft has violated fundamental consumer rights. It is unacceptable that Ubisoft considers in its terms and conditions that players acquire only a simple license to use the game, which would then be revocable at any time by the publisher. Exactly. And look at the terms they're contesting. To deny consumers ownership rights over acquired game copies, to remove all access to the game without guarantee of maintaining an alternative mode of operation for consumers. Now here's an area that could be a language difference or has some nuance. We, of course, don't think companies need to maintain anything once support ends. They just have to not destroy the damn game in the process. I think that's probably what they mean. To make the use of the game subject to online services that may be interrupted at any time by the publisher, and to exclude any refund of sums credited by consumers to their Ubisoft electronic wallet. Okay, the wallet part I'm a little unclear on, since that sounds like an additional issue Ubisoft might be in trouble with. The wording on this sounds like Ubisoft might have been fleecing people another way with digital wallets also. That's not Stop Killing Games' issue, but we're certainly not complaining if the UFC is adding that to their lawsuit. What I find more interesting is the part above that, about not making the game depend on online services that can be turned off in the first place. That's a more radical stance than what I've been aiming for. Not because I'm against it, but because this has been such an uphill battle for us every step of the way. So I wanted to maximize our odds of success, and that's an even bigger ask. So thank you, UFC, for pushing the Overton window past where I am, with a lawsuit no less. I've seen many comments similar to this before, saying publishers shouldn't make games require a connection to them if they don't need to. I've never pushed that argument, because you can bet publishers will insist they always need to for every game they do it in. They could just argue that they need it to prevent piracy or to ensure their microtransactions aren't enabled by users offline. Well, under that logic, they need to make the game connect to them. And on the flip side, I can't think of any game that needs to be hosted by the publisher if the customer has access to the right software. I mean, there are customer-hosted private servers for multiple MMORPGs today, some of which can host thousands of players. So that line of argument always felt more like a values clash and was too subjective for me to run with it. But hell, if the UFC wants to in court, Great. Beyond these contractual clauses, the UFC also points to misleading commercial practices surrounding the sale of the game The Crew. Players were never fairly informed about the potentially temporary nature of access to the game they were buying. Okay, this is the whole labeling argument, which I'm not a fan of. Now you might think, well, isn't this still pro-consumer? Sort of. Here's the thing. If we solve this, removing all access to the game without any guarantee of maintaining an alternative mode of operation for consumers, then we don't need clear labeling because then the problem isn't even present anymore. To their credit, Ubisoft did tell you they could screw you at any time when they sold The Crew and many other games. Our issue has never been that they didn't say that clearly enough, but that they're engaged in this practice in the first place. But I don't know French legal procedures, so maybe this is just to buttress the larger issues to show they're screwing people every which way, and this wasn't just some honest mistake. Through this legal action, UFC-Que Choisir intends to put an end to these harmful practices, obtain the removal of the disputed clauses, and to have the harm done to the collective interest of consumers recognized. This is such a breath of fresh air. Over the years, I've gotten tired of hearing the argument that buying a game entitles you to nothing, and the only problem with that is that people aren't being told clearly that they're entitled to nothing. How about no? How about we just enforce basic rights and stop publishers from selling games based on scam business practices? Oh, and look at this. The case of The Crew illustrates a worrying trend in the video game market. More and more games require a constant internet connection, allowing publishers to remotely disable games legitimately purchased by consumers without justification or alternative solutions. Damn straight. This trend is also accompanied by other problematic issues, such as the growing reliance on paid DLC and arbitrary banning of user accounts. Look at the UFC pushing that Overton window, swinging for the fences. Then they go on to point out how they've been bros in the past, taking on unjust bans and planned obsolescence of Nintendo's Switch controllers. Then they talk about how this is a problem for preservation and end it with, a game purchased by a consumer cannot literally disappear at the sole whim of its publisher. Well, unfortunately, it can, but it shouldn't, and that's what we're trying to change. But that is outstanding. I know I sure appreciate the UFC taking this issue to court. Now, I confess, I've actually known this was coming for a while now, over a year. I didn't know when, but I was told not to say anything about it until it was official, so I didn't. All I was allowed to say was that the UFC might look into this. Well, they did. Now, I'm very happy about this because I think this is actually the first concrete action to come out of the campaign. I mean, sure, we've done government petitions, gotten the signatures for the European Citizens Initiative, filed complaints to consumer agencies, talked to the EU Commission, but that's all just been asking for help, essentially. This is different. This is pressing charges against a company for breaking the law on this issue. Now, some may point out that Ubisoft already had another lawsuit going on over The Crew in California. But I've said before in another video, that wasn't us. And even if that one's successful, I think it will be on a technicality and won't prevent future games from being destroyed. This one from the UFC, however, is the real deal and could shift industry behavior. And it's taken 2 years to get here. I see all this like planting seeds, and this is the first sprout to come out of the soil. Well, we've been planting a lot of seeds. It's worth mentioning that our complaints sent to the DGCCRF earlier, France's Consumer Protection Agency, are completely separate from this. The decision from them is still ongoing, so Ubisoft might be facing 3 lawsuits for all I know. Or maybe more. France's consumer laws are not radically different from many other countries across the European Union. So while they're certainly leading the charge, it's possible we could see penalties emerging down the line for publishers engaged in this practice from Germany, Spain, Sweden, Poland, and so on. Now that's all going to take a lot of time and organization, but this is a big step towards getting the law enforced. The more attention and transparency this issue gets, the better it is for us. Yeah, that's one area where we disagree with the industry a little bit. We don't think it's customers that are the ones that need to be better informed about what publishers are doing. We think it's judges and regulators that should be more clearly informed about that. And it's worth mentioning, this is all happening at a time where we still have no new law on the issue of game destruction. We're certainly trying to do that also, since that will make this all go faster and easier, but Ubisoft is getting sued on the grounds of existing law in France. Which means if they're found guilty, that can open up the door for the rest of the industry engaged in this practice. Believe it or not, our goal isn't actually to dogpile on Ubisoft. That's coincidental. They just made themselves the perfect target to get the ball rolling on all of this. It's a much bigger issue across the video games industry. Ironically, Ubisoft themselves released server source code to World in Conflict after shutdown, preserving its online multiplayer, which is above and beyond what we're asking for. So sometimes they're going the extra distance by doing more than anyone expects for preservation, and other times they're likely breaking the law in order to not do the bare minimum of responsibility. It's just kind of chaotic behavior, really. Anyway, another reason I'm happy about this is this kind of validates what I've been saying for years now. That the practice of game destruction is so consumer hostile, I really think it does violate the law in many countries, especially France. However, I'm still just a chump YouTuber, so I realize I don't have the credibility for many people to believe that, even when I have evidence. But the UFC's actions speak volumes. They never would have started a lawsuit if they didn't think there was a legal basis for it. Now, gamers are not known for their patience, except maybe Half-Life or Star Citizen fans. They're pretty patient. So I can understand why there's skepticism of Stop Killing Games accomplishing things, because it has taken a long time. Government moves slowly, but things are moving, and this is the proof. I really think we're going to win this in the long term. Okay, so that's the first news. The other news is the European Citizens Initiative will be having its official hearing in EU Parliament on April 16th. Though as I understand it, we already have Parliament majority support, but this is going to boost it even more. And to escalate things on my end, apparently I'm going to be invited to attend as a speaker. Now, I never even knew that was an option until a few days ago. I thought at most all I could be was an observer. I wasn't even sure if there was a point in me attending. But no, apparently the initiative wants me to speak there. I do not know how much. There will be lawyers and developers there, so I don't think I'll have to speak on anything too specialized. If I had to guess, I think they want me to tag along for miscellaneous stuff. I'd say the things I have going for me on this are I'm very aware of the problem, and I've probably heard every opposition argument under the sun as to why companies should be allowed to destroy games you've paid for. I can swat that stuff down all day. So, I guess I'm going to EU Parliament in a few weeks. Oh yeah, I'm sure I'll look like I belong there. Now later that day there's going to be another press conference. This one may be bigger than before. And I've been asked to mention Alderaan Games is helping to sponsor that, which makes Path of Titans. They're not sponsoring this video though, I'm saying this voluntarily. And I should mention we've also had help before from the game Torn. I like the irony that both of these are online games, so clearly they think they can handle an end-of-life plan. And joining with Stop Killing Games is doesitplay.org, which might be the best index around for determining how safe physical copies of games are. I'll almost certainly be talking at the press conference. I might even be the host. It depends on if we can find someone better before then. Speaking of which, if you're a streamer, YouTuber, or just press in general, and you would like to attend, either in person or online, let us know. You'll likely be able to ask questions and be part of the conversation. Contact this email for Stop Killing Games. This is a new one being set up by the NGO. Anything official you should send here. Now the website stopkillinggames.com still has my personal mail since that's left over from the beginning, where I had to play the role of lighthouse keeper, otherwise things would have fallen apart. You can still contact me personally about whatever, but anything specifically for the Stop Killing Games movement should be sent to the new address. Speaking of which, The website as it is now is going to be retired in the near future, as it's mostly served its purpose on my end. You're welcome to back it up if you want. I intend to hand it over to the NGO for them to do whatever they want with it. I don't even know all their plans, but I hope watchdog action similar to what we did with The Crew is part of it in the future for other games. Alright, that's it. Ubisoft is getting sued and I have a bunch of homework to do for EU Parliament. See ya!